come true.
So thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. Jorge, Mark, Emily, Adarsh. It's such a pleasure to be here and to have all of you guys and take a moment to talk. For those that are joining us, this is kicking off Earth Week. This is Earth Day initiatives and Future Meets Presence, part of their virtual festival. And there are a lot of things going on today. This is just one of a few talks. So we're really happy to take part in it. And I'm really happy to be here to bring some friends and colleagues that are really doing some inspiring work. So I'm going to get into it pretty quick and just give a quick introduction to everyone of who the panelists are. And then we're going to get into some questions. So to start off, Adarsh Alphons, he is the founder of Wardrobe. And prior to Wardrobe, he founded Project Art, currently the nation's largest art school, without owning a single building. His background, he's a proven leader in the sharing economy space, made Project Art a nationally scaled enterprise. Excuse me. He's a CNN hero, a community scholar from Columbia University, and he's a 40 under 40 in the global art business world. Wardrobe is an incredible startup that launched in the past few years and has been reshaping the fashion industry in a pretty major way. So we're very excited to have him. Thank you so much, Adarsh. Mark Gorton is the founder and chairman of Tower Research Capital. It's one of the leading computerized trading firms in the world, and he's also the founder and CEO of the file sharing company LimeWire. He's a huge advocate for livable streets, alternative transportation, and open government as the founder and chairman of Open Plans, a nonprofit devoted to the pursuit of smart planning and civil engagement through media and digital tools.
Sorry,
He's the chairman
everybody.
of Reinvent Albany, a New York state-focused good government organization, and most recently CityRise, which I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about today. He graduated from Yale University with a BS in electrical engineering and earned an MS in electrical engineering from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. Emily Moxon is the co-founder and managing director of Brownswood Recordings. In partnership with DJ broadcaster Giles Peterson and music industry vet Simon Joff. I believe that's how it's pronounced. She spent over 20 years working with the underground left of center music in the UK's thriving independent sector and is super passionate about pushing forward a progressive, entrepreneurial, and ethical approach in the music business. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. We're excited to hear about everything sustainable in music, me especially. And Jorge is a highly acclaimed industry innovator. He has been leading and founded Plexis healthcare system since its founding in 1996. His expertise is in developing key partnerships, and his expertise and experience directing the design, development, and deployment of information technology systems for the healthcare industry resulted in Plexis' continued growth in the US and abroad. So based in the Pacific Northwest, Plexis is recognized as one of the nation's fastest growing healthcare technology companies, and he's the founder of several successful technology businesses and is the former CIO of one of the largest law firms in the country, Heller, Ehrman, White, and McAuliffe, I believe it's pronounced. He was a consultant with Price Waterhouse and a director of administration at the UC Berkeley Law School. He was appointed to the Oregon Health Policy Commission by Governor Ted Kulongoski in 2004 and has delivered speeches to a wide range of executive, business, and health industry audiences. He's also the founder and leader of the Quepasana Foundation, which is a foundation dedicated to collective awakening through insight meditation. He holds a Master of Science degree in Systems Management from the University of Southern California and has a bachelor's degree in Business Administration from the University of New Mexico. Thank you, Jorge, for joining us. The four of you are an incredible group of humans, and I can't wait to dive into this. So What I would love to know, I kind of gave a quick overview. All of you are here because in some way or another, you've set an example prioritizing sustainable practices in all of your sectors: fashion, music, transportation, and health, in your personal lives and in the companies you guys have started. Can each of you guys give a quick description of the current role and the roles and responsibilities that most define it? When it comes to the company and its operations, and to how sustainability comes into it. And there's no order. If I'd say go forth and speak.
Sounds good. Go alphabetically, I guess. My background is my name is Adarsh. I've known Neal for over a decade. My previous startup, Project Art, it's a nonprofit in the education space, serving underserved youth. It's based out of Harlem. That's where Nick was founding Harlem Arts Festival. Making sure underrepresented and underserved communities have access to cultural outlets that the rest of the world is able to enjoy and use that as an outlet. Interest and background's always been in social impact. After Project Art scaled up, but two and a half, 3 years ago, I wanted to sort of pursue my next thing, and realized that there were all these clothes that were sitting in my closet that I hadn't worn in a long time. And of course, as a guy, I know that, but then I know for women that's even more the case, because there's just so many more options, and of course we need lots of clothes because clothes are a way to express ourselves. But in just the last 15 years, the utility of clothes have sort of gone down. By the average usage of items has really plummeted, like 100%, and so there's all this stuff we don't wear, but want to wear more and more stuff. So how do we make sure? Is it possible to have an Airbnb like model of sort of sharing economy based on these things? And obviously the goal was to reduce waste and to increase usage. And what does that mean for carbon footprint? Fast fashion and fashion industry in general is one of the greatest polluters out there. Everything from microfibers to dyes to one kind of I'm sure you all are very familiar with the space, or the kind of the perilous effects of mass-produced fashion and apparel. But one such stat is that within something like 73% of the clothes we buy today end up in landfill within 2 years. So something to think about. And of course, the stuff that we still have that are not in the landfill, we wear it less and less. So wardrobe helps to tackle some of those things. And yeah, that's about it. It's a journey in learning. We would definitely not say that we are all 100% sustainable or any of that stuff. We try to get some carbon offsets for the measures that we're not able to control right now. We try to reuse as much as possible, have nothing part of our system that's single use. But we try to be transparent about the environmental impact and footprint we have, and what we hope to achieve. Thank you.
I think I'll go if we're going alphabetically. I'm the managing director of Brownswood Recordings. In terms of my sustainability role, it's like a super small company. I'm definitely a jack of all trades within the business, but I think it's been important for me to take this role on myself to just make sure that environmental and sustainable thinking is really like baked into all the decision making across the company and really stays high on the agenda. So yeah, and I think as a record label, there's the practices of our manufacturing, but I think as important or even more important is really our role as kind of cultural communicators, and how we use our platform to talk about sustainability, and how we support artists as well to talk about sustainability. So yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, I'm Mark Gorton. I am the founder and chairman of Open Plans, which is active in New York and to a lesser extent around the world, on the topic of livable streets, transportation reform, making cities more a better environment for people, reducing the amount of automobile traffic. And we've been fighting this fight for decades and have been making good progress along the way. You see a lot more bike lanes in New York and public plazas and dedicated bus lanes and things like that. During the pandemic, you saw the huge growth in outdoor restaurants and pedestrianized streets as they were closed to car traffic and opened up to people. And there's a whole large community of us in New York who are fighting for these changes. I mean, every single change is always a battle. But I really think we're on the point of another phase shift where you really see that a large fraction of the people, a clear majority, really understand that it's possible to have a city with less cars and traffic. It's possible to have a city that's better for people and biking and walking and just living outside. And really what we're trying to do is reclaim the urban environment as a human ecosystem where people can really live, instead of having all of our streets be so dangerous that, you know, if a kid runs out, they're going to get killed in traffic. And you know, we're continuing to work on this, and it's, you know, it's a multi-decade long effort.
Yes, it is. As someone who was in New York for 10 years. Yeah, yes, it is. Thank you. Jorge.
Yes, I guess one of the advantages of being named Yant is I get to go last in alphabetical order and get to listen to everybody else's stories first. As Neal mentioned, I am the founder, chairman, and CEO of Plexis Healthcare Systems, a company that has been in business for about 25 years now, helping the healthcare industry lower administrative expenses, essentially. And by doing that, we make healthcare more accessible to more people. But more importantly for today's topic, which is sustainability and sustainable practices, I've used Plexis as a platform to help me do other things. And one of them was I started funding a lab about 7 years ago here in Maui, where we're doing research on various different types of projects aimed at helping in the environment. We were working on a wave energy project, and through that, we discovered that a lot of the harm that was being done to our equipment underwater and under high pressure could be solved by using magnets, internal magnets. And through that, we discovered that we had created a new valve that basically doesn't leak. And that's important because leaky valves today represent a huge environmental hazard. And there are over 72 million metric tons of toxic waste polluting the environment as a result of leaky valves every year. And we've solved that problem. We now are in the process of taking it to market. We've gotten all the patents in place. We've got a team in place, and we're meeting with some of the largest oil producers and some of the largest valve companies. And we're trying to get this out as quickly as possible to help with what is a serious environmental problem. So that is one of the areas in which I've been involved, that and I'm the chairman of that group that is helping on sustainable practices. But more importantly, my real passion has been over the last 10 years in leading silent meditation courses here in Maui and also in the Pacific Northwest, because what I came to understand was that the real source of everything we think of as a problem, including climate change, violence, you name it, whatever it is human consciousness, human awareness. If we can raise consciousness, if we can raise awareness, if we can help people understand their role in the world from a different perspective, we can solve all these problems, regardless of whatever the economic system is, regardless of whatever the political system is, or what the business environment is. If we improve our consciousness, we're going to solve all these problems. So that's really what I'm dedicating my life to now, is leading these meditation courses and bringing people together to learn more about how they operate in the world. And my cat is running wild here. You'll probably hear him in the background. So that's really the core of it. We're doing some things on the environment. We're doing some things in healthcare, but primarily it's all as a way of supporting work that is raising consciousness.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
Neal, by the way, attended one of my meditation courses.
I think I even told Adarsh and Mark about them. Very, very powerful stuff. And I would definitely recommend people to look into it. Change perspectives.
And these meditation courses are given, they're given to the community for free. It's a gift. People come in and they sit in silence and they do various other types of somatic practices that allow them to connect with themselves. But we do it in a way that helps anyone from any walk of life can do these practices. They're non-sectarian, they're non-dogmatic. It's just simple practices that help you connect, and they're given away for free to anyone who wants to come.
Yeah. So we'll touch on that a little.
I remember Neal mentioning it. It sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I think he had just got back from doing that, and he mentioned it was transformative. It sounded awesome, but also very intense.
So thank you guys for sharing that. I'm interested in kind of laying the groundwork a little bit, since each of you guys are in such specific worlds. What is the state of your industries today? Can you talk about, where, when it comes to sustainability, what has your industry been doing or not doing that really kind of puts you in a space you think, okay, here's my company, here's me personally, and here's almost a motivation or inspiration for what to do, what you guys are doing. So talk a little bit about that, just a quick overview of what are some of the things, in tech, in healthcare, in fashion, in music, that are really, where we are, so people can kind of get that sense that are listening in. We can go the alphabetical route if that helps.
I didn't mean to set a trend, but I mean, I'm sure I can just speak in a limited manner, even to my own field, because there's so much going on, and it seems like there's several folks on this panel, and I'm sure a part of our guests here who have probably just as much to share. So I would say the technology sector in general, maybe if I can just touch on that for a second, because primarily, even though we're in the fashion space, we're actually a software company. Climate is, it really seems like it's the era of climate for the next 10 years. There's obviously a ton of funding from the federal government focusing on that, incentivizing that, and things like electric cars and all of that is renewable in general. It's going to be a macro trend, and it's going to be just an incredible amount of innovation coming. So there is, there's both venture money and a lot of just millennials and Gen Z in particular, and Gen Xers and boomers. Everyone is just leaning into sustainability as it's like table stakes now for any company, it seems like. And so there's going to be a lot of sort of innovation, talented people, and a lot of funds flowing into that, which is going to create incredible things. And even things like beyond meat, because farm-raised beef is actually very environmentally detrimental of the amount of methane that's produced. And so there's lab-grown stuff or stuff that's actually vegetables with I guess certain processes that are organic applied to it are competing now. Beyond Meat, just I think 2 years ago when it went public, it was one of the best performing companies. Went up to like 400%. So there's a lot of seems like the economics is supporting it. It's going to be something that would be very, very exciting. At least I think both healthcare as well as sustainability is going to be really huge in the next couple of years. In terms of fashion, if I can touch on that, what I would say is there's definitely a trend. Companies like Gucci and all have basically said they aim to be either carbon neutral or carbon negative in the next decade or so. And companies that were, or brands that were more kind of esoteric or niche 10 years ago are becoming more and more kind of central to sustainability story now, from ThredUp to Stella McCartney to Reformation, of course, wardrobe. People are tackling in different ways, and we think consumers demand that, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that stuff happening. Even companies like when we were actually raising, one of the folks that we were talking to and still are friendly with is H&M Collab, which is H&M's venture arm. And H&M fast fashion, you would think they would not be interested in this space because it would they would be the most, they would have the most to be disrupted. Interestingly enough, they are very much into this kind of stuff, and they see the writing on the wall, they know what's coming up, and they are investing very heavily in companies that they could collaborate with down the future, perhaps acquire, perhaps empower with H&M scale and operations, and so it's happening on all sides. It's encouraging. COVID did not help anyone with that, because when something like a recession happens, people tend to fall back on innovation and focus more on just things that perform well economically. But I think hopefully this year moving forward, it'd be coming back.
Thanks. Mark, in terms of, give us a quick overview when it comes to public transportation and that world. What is the current state that it's in? You might want to specifically talk about New York or larger cities as a whole when it comes to what they're doing sustainably, what they're doing right, and what they're not doing right. Yeah, dive into that a little bit.
Well, really what we're seeing now, at least in New York, I can't speak to the rest of the country and the world as much, is this realization that there's a better way for the city to be organized, and that cars are just a poor transportation technology for a dense urban environment. And this is a radical change, not that everyone gets it. I mean, these mindset changes take generations and some people get it faster than others, but at least along a significant number of people, and particularly the engaged policymakers, there's really an understanding that this is a way to go. I don't think, and I also think that you're really starting to get a larger and larger number of people who see that. It's my goal to reduce the number of cars, private cars in New York City by maybe 90%, and pedestrianize about half the streets. And I think that these goals are really achievable in a fairly short time frame, at least in New York. If you go and talk about a place like Houston or Atlanta, you're talking about cities, that are sprawling, where the buildings are very far apart, where the land uses are very different. Those places, if they're going to change, it's going to take hundreds of years. But in the older cities that were built around rail and things like that, you you have the potential. It's really more of a policy change than anything else. And you're really starting to get this sense, and I really think the pandemic was useful in this effect, because of the emergency of the pandemic, restaurants were allowed to take over parking spaces, and that, you had many thousands of parking spaces in New York that were repurposed for outdoor dining. I mean, getting rid of a parking space in New York is always been like a little mini civil war in a neighborhood. And the amount of fighting has really paralyzed politicians and the Department of Transportation. So you suddenly had this emergency, which created a need for a change. And the outdoor dining is enormously popular. I don't think anyone wants to go back to the way it was before. And there were a lot of people who suddenly saw like, oh, wait, we can do something different with our streets other than just park cars. We've been saying the same stuff for decades, but it's somehow clicking into people's heads now. And again, it's different. Some neighborhoods get this better than others, but you really find this kind of latent public demand that is filtering through into the political space. You have elections that are coming up in New York for the mayor and 2/3 of city council. It's the biggest local election cycle in New York in decades. And if you listen to what the politicians are saying, they're saying stuff that no politician would have said 5 years ago. And 10, 15 years ago, only people like me were saying this stuff. And so you really have had this understanding by politicians that these changes, livable street changes, are popular and their constituents want them. And as they go around, they see this, they experience it. They go out on a street that's been closed to traffic and is a bunch of restaurants, and everyone's saying how great this is. So we're suffering in New York because Bill de Blasio is such a poor administrator and basically doesn't understand what it is to properly function as a mayor of a city, and thinks that somehow tweeting is the same as running the city. So we're struggling on the administration front, just because the level of incompetence and lack of leadership in the city is frustrating us on the implementation side. But I'm really optimistic that things in New York are set up for another phase shift starting the beginning of next year, when we get new elected leaders in place. I mean, we did see a phase shift over the last 10 or 15 years where, building bike lanes is now kind of expected function of government, building dedicated bus lanes, like these sorts of things happen. They're just happening at a fairly incremental pace. And if anyone goes and travels to Northern Europe and you go see cities like Copenhagen or Utrecht or Ghent or those places, like, we have so far to go here, and it's going to take quite a while. But I mean, those cities in Northern Europe are decades ahead of us in terms of this sort of public acceptance of these programs. So we're, just decades behind in terms of how things are going. But that decades lag from Europe is still progress in the United States, where if you're saying a city is going to significantly reduce the amount of cars, I mean, that's radical. I mean, 20 years ago, that was borderline communism. Now that's getting much more mainstream, and we're really getting ready to take the next steps.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like this will be touching on something that is like an overarching theme here, which is really that crisis fosters innovation. And this is really what this is about, and you guys are representing. So I think it's only fitting, if we're talking about Europe, that we talk to Emily, who's calling in from London, who can talk really about the music industry, which has obviously changed in the last, every single decade, every 5 years is changing. But you guys are really pioneering the way when it comes to a sustainable mindset. I'd love to kind of know where we're coming from here, as it, what was the state of the landscape before you guys got into the picture?
Well, I think the big trend in the last 10 years has obviously been the shift to streaming, which, like, on the surface of it, might sound like a good thing from a sustainability point of view. But actually the carbon footprint of the music industry has increased quite drastically in that time. I think a really big kind of headline problem in the music industry is there's just too much music being put out, and it's just terribly, terribly wasteful. You've obviously got the three major record companies who are operating on a business model where really 1% of their output is making enough money to cover the other 99%, which is failing. And that is just such a wasteful model from any point of view, from a sustainability point of view, but even just from a human point of view, it's just so wasteful and kind of heartbreaking that 99% of what you're doing is really a failure. I think at the kind of other end of the scale, there's now a very low bar to entry in the market. There's a mind-blowing stat, which is a couple of months out of date, that there's 60,000 songs a day being uploaded onto Spotify. And I think about a quarter of the music on Spotify, nobody has ever listened to it. Like, people aren't even getting their mums to listen to their songs, you know, and that's just, I find that so heartbreaking. It's like there's so much being put into this music, and all of that output carries a footprint. So I think that's a big kind of headline problem. And I guess like our response to it is we're really trying to do less projects, but make sure that the projects have a big kind of cultural impact. And that can be a very difficult thing to measure, because it's really about the kind of emotional impact. But I mean, now when I'm signing a project or going into a project, the question that I'm asking myself, ironically, because you just asked about the last 10 years, is in 10 years time, will this record mean something? Will people still hold this record close to their hearts? Because I just don't want to be a part of that kind of throwaway culture at all. So yeah, it's kind of like fast fashion, fast music, you know.
Before we move to Jorge, just getting a sense of the actual carbon footprint. What I mean, you're talking about there's so much music being uploaded. Is there a sustainable or environmental impact that has, whether it's in storage or physical? I mean, I know that in a manufacturing way, you guys also used recycled materials to kind of make the vinyls and things that you guys do. But
I mean,
a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, the vinyl has kind of grown alongside streaming, and I think a lot of people think of vinyl as being kind of quite a benign product, and in many ways it is. You know, people tend to like, you know, it doesn't get thrown away a lot. There's a very robust like secondhand economy for vinyl as well, but it is a very toxic substance, and you definitely do not want vinyl ending up in landfill at all, and it's pretty toxic getting it out of the ground as well. So yeah, but I think the carbon footprint of like the internet and the devices that we consume internet on it's a kind of like, it's maybe something that's a bit hidden, and I think we don't, you know, it's taking a while to kind of fully understand the impact of those things.
Got it.
But yeah, I couldn't give you a number on it.
Got it. Jorge, so you're obviously coming from a few different perspectives here, both on Plexis and for Quepasana. Give us the landscape, especially as you're creating these spaces for, and you touched a little bit about some of the runoff, but how you're really making sustainable, completely off-grid spaces, and you know, less diving into the future, but what is the current landscape of these kinds of spaces today? Are they sustainable? Are they not? Are you guys pioneering or innovating on that?
Right. Well, before I get to that, let me talk a little bit about the valve, because
Sure.
I think that's probably the most appropriate thing to discuss today, since the topic is sustainability. One of the biggest problems right now in manufacturing and oil and gas and chemical industries is what are called fugitive emissions, unintended leaks of toxic waste into the environment. And what we're seeing in the industry, and the worst of those, by the way, is the oil and gas industry. They represent the vast majority of the fugitive emissions that are happening around the world today. And there's a lot of attention being paid to that. We've spoken at international conferences over the last couple of years, specifically on the topic of fugitive emissions. And we're seeing a lot of attention being paid to reducing the carbon footprint of these gross polluters, if you will. And we're getting a lot of attention. We're seeing people far more interested in doing something about these things than we were even just 5 years ago. We've now rejoined the Paris Climate Accord, and the idea there is to eliminate CO2 gas emissions by the year 2050. And there's a lot of different things that need to happen on a lot of different fronts, but fugitive emissions are a much bigger problem than most people realize. I don't think anybody really thinks in those terms. So as far as what's happening in our sector there and what we're seeing in the industry, not only from the government side, which is there's a lot more funding going towards these things, but there's just a lot more attention being paid to it. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of very forward progress there. Now, back to your question, Neal, about what we're doing. These meditation courses that I've been conducting over the last 10 years happen at several different locations, a couple of them here in Maui and one in Oregon. And what we're doing is we're building sort of eco-villages, off-the-grid, sustainable farming communities that are dedicated to meditative practices and to giving back to the community. We're growing our own food. We are completely off the grid. We're generating our own power and living sustainably in a way, all permaculture type practices. And so we're creating sustainable communities dedicated to awareness and consciousness and through insight meditation practices. And there's a tremendous amount of interest in that. I have wait lists of hundreds of people that want to attend the courses. Sometimes people have to wait years to be able to join a course. So there's a lot of interest from all walks of life, people from every corner of the planet, people from every industry, all socioeconomic factors are very, very interested in participating in these courses and doing something to better themselves and better the planet. So there's a lot of reason to hope. There's a lot of reason to see that there's forward progress being made, both internally in the case of humans and taking action externally in the areas where I'm playing.
Got it. And that's a good segue to, we can go back the other way, Emily and then Mark and then Adarsh. Really for each of you guys and for the companies that you are, like what is the biggest thing that you guys are, how are you improving the industry? How are you innovating or kind of pushing to make these industries that you've identified, some of the issues and the challenges that you guys have? What are you guys doing to really change the game?
I think for Brownswood, it was really important to look at our manufacturing, so specifically vinyl. The first thing that I really did was like talk to a lot of the factories about what they were doing. I was manufacturing a lot of my stuff, a lot of my records in Germany, and they sent me a form. But I spoke to a company called the Vinyl Factory that's based just outside London, and he came back so passionate about sustainability, and it just he hadn't just like created a form to put on his website. He was like super into it, and he invited me to the factory. I think anyone who is manufacturing anything should really make an effort to visit the factory and see the conditions for themselves and get a sense of it. So he was showing me the production, and when you get the PVC and you make a record, you kind of squash it between two plates, and then you get a bit of PVC that like spills out the side that gets cut off. And he was showing me how he had a process to collect the pieces, and it was, you know, people kind of think of, or there was a perception that recycled vinyl was kind of crap, because it did used to be kind of crap. Like they used to go around and like sweep the bits up off the floor and chuck them back in the machines. And so pressing your records on kind of virgin vinyl was considered a mark of quality. But being able to see it with my own eyes and see the process, I was like, there is no reason why you can't create a really high quality product with recycled vinyl. So we worked together to produce a jazz record that was like a very audiophile record as a partnership, to kind of show that making a audiophile record on recycled vinyl was kind of possible, I guess. And then we've just, you know, we've switched all our vinyl manufacturing over to recycled vinyl over the past year and a half. I mean, also like moving it to the UK from Europe has meant a way lower carbon footprint. We also came up with a scheme, whereas if we had any overstock in our factories, he was driving a van to our distribution center every day, dropping off different clients' products. And he was like, if you have any vinyl that's ending up unsold and it comes from his factory, that he will take it back and reuse it in the factory. So we kind of created our own little circle there. So yeah, it's been really a good alliance, I think, with the factory to work on manufacturing.
Great.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a little bit.
Yeah.
Mark, I know CityRise is something that's really emerged in the past year. Talk a little bit about that and how some of the initiatives you guys are spearheading, and even some of the other companies that you're a part of.
So, I mean, CityRise is an initiative of Open Plans, which has a set of policies that we are advocating for, you know, specifically for New York now. And really, the way we're engaging is on one hand, it's this education front where we're putting forth a bunch of best practices. Some of them are somewhat technical, but actually very important, because we've seen over the last couple decades, New York City has made efforts to pedestrianize space and to move away from the car. And really, what a lot of those efforts are now failing on, it has to do with the structural form of the New York City government and the Department of Transportation. So basically, the core structure of the Department of Transportation is extremely car-oriented, and they basically are structured as they manage a transportation network. So everything that they think about is in terms of traffic flow and keeping traffic moving. And there's certainly, I mean, that they need to have that mindset. I mean, you know, we are a big city, you do need to have traffic that functions, but that is really the exclusive function of the Department of Transportation. And what you see is that when you want to make streets livable for people and talk about making them good places to eat outside, for kids to play, to, you know, for street vendors, for, you know, for concerts, and, you know, actual places for people to live. It's not at all about the network flow. It's about looking at streets as places. And in the New York City government structure, and really, I mean, I think this is true in probably most parts of the US, there is no part of the government that focuses on streets as places. So you have the Department of Sanitation that cleans the streets, but again, they view this as sending trucks and street sweepers down the street. And you have, you know, the Department of Transportation, which again thinks about cars driving down the street. And if you say, well, you know what, you know, I have some very low, I want to have a, you know, just plant a garden in the street. I want to put some pots out in the street or something like that. You could literally talk to the entire New York City government and not find anybody who says like, oh, we can handle that. Whereas it's such a trivial thing. I mean, you can literally have someone pick up a pot from inside their house, move it out to the curb and put it down. And it's that easy. And you see in other cities around the world, it really does function like that. But in New York, that's illegal. And you can be sued for that. And we have all sorts of problems in the city now where the city, there are volunteers who have stepped up in the middle of a pandemic to create space where, you know, people could get outside and recreate and not be trapped in their apartments. And they move barriers and things like that. Those people are being told by the city that they are accepting liability for whatever happens in the street. So a truck goes and hits somebody, those people can be sued now. So no surprise, what you're seeing is the volunteers who stepped up are now running for cover, because why should they be logically stepping up and taking liability? So, you know, we're dealing with trying to get legislation passed or work with the city to remove these liability requirements, which again, you would be amazed at how desperately people in government cling to these liability requirements. And it's a very oppressive administrative environment for people-oriented transportation and people-oriented uses of the streets. So really a lot of what we're doing is just hacking away at this infrastructure of discrimination so that we can actually have these streets that are friendly to people and have these things that are overwhelmingly popular. But you just see time and time again, advocates step up, they try and do something, and they are just far too many fights to try and do really simple things in the neighborhood. So it's a lot of tactical things like that. We're engaging with the candidates who are running for office to try and educate them, and we're making great progress on all these fronts. But it's a nonstop battle on so many different fronts. I mean, peeling back the automobile in the United States and all of the assumptions and structural biases in favor of the automobile, it's a lot, and there's always more.
Right. Just being mindful of time, we've got about 10 minutes left. Adarsh, I know we'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up and see if we have a question or two. But Adarsh, talk a little bit about wardrobe. You guys the core functionality of what you guys are doing is certainly addressing sustainability and clothes in terms of making sure they're reusable and removing that kind of waste. But talk about that, and if there's any particular initiatives that you guys are pushing forward. Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
Yeah, that's nice. What we try to do is pretty simple and straightforward, which is, we're a two-sided marketplace. So there are people who, say, here, I would like to lend out my clothes. Here, wardrobe, take it, lend it out to anyone. And of course, those folks who are there, let's say I'm lending out my clothes, I would get paid out with every single rental that's every time somebody wants to wear my stuff. And we're a managed marketplace, so we take care of all the dry cleaning and making sure that we collect the payment for it and pay out the right person and all that stuff, and certain guarantees that we offer. But on the renter side, it's do you want to spend money to buy something that you may only wear two times and then consider it old, which is, statistically, after someone wears something 3 times, it's generally considered old, according to the general survey. And so, we invite both sides of the marketplace to be, to protagonists in sustainability. So just by lending your clothes out, you are opening up for sharing, even if your motive is to make money off of it, which we think is a totally fair motive, a totally reasonable motive. You are letting someone choose, to reuse clothes as opposed to buy something in fast fashion. And the prices that, because of how lean we built wardrobe, the prices are actually extremely expensive. So it's the cost of an Uber ride crossed down. So it's very, very inexpensive. And And we're seeing you know, some really interesting stats, like roughly, I mean, approximately 100% of folks, once they give their stuff to be lended out on Wardrobe, they keep it on Wardrobe. They even see folks who buy from platforms like the Real Real, which are resale platforms. And Wardrobe is not a resale platform; we're purely peer-to-peer rental. They buy it and then rent it out on Wardrobe because they can gain economic benefit from it. So the economic fundamentals are obviously very important here, and to make sure it works for everyone, and that's kind of how we can make sure we're a sustainable company in the long haul. But you know we see kind of supported by economics, but folks joining to be protagonists in the circular fashion space over and over again. And on the renting side too, we're seeing roughly 80% of folks that touch our inventory end up renting for a second time, which is to say that they approve the purchase, they want to do it again. And in another sense, like, Wardrobe has no curator. We're not, I don't have a fashion background. In fact, most of the time I just wear a white t-shirt that I buy wholesale from Costco or Hanes. And the we are about people. So it's your fashion and it's your taste and it's somebody else's taste. And just by focusing on getting people to who've used their eye to make purchases or acquire things or being got gifted from somewhere, it just adds to a richness in the marketplace that one would never get if, let's say, we had a curator or some person who was editing out clothes as they came in and out of the platform. Which is to say, you'll find goth on the platform, you'll find vintage and contemporary, and stuff that's like very black and art gallery-ish, and then stuff that you'd find for cosplay or Comic-Con type of stuff. But so
Right.
there's something for everyone, and we and folks find a lot of joy when they are able to access those things. It's kind of like borrowing from your best friend, except the entire world as closets are open. So there's it's sustainability, but that brings a lot of joy to people that are involved.
So last question, I'm going to ask you guys as best as you can to keep it to a few sentences, really consolidate this idea. But what do you guys think is the future of your industry as it intersects with sustainability? Brainstorm if you want to think 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, but what do you see as that ideal future? Yeah. Not everyone at once.
I'll go. Yeah, I'll go very quickly. So yeah, I think obviously touring has been absolutely decimated over the last year, and we definitely want to get touring back. But I think we've shown that there is an audience for live streamed concerts, and I think that has really exciting potential in terms of sustainability.
I guess I'll go. I would say that I expect to see a significant reduction in the usage of cars in cities, and particularly dense cities. You're already seeing that in Europe, and you're going to start to see that particularly in some of the older US cities here.
I think folks are gonna be more conscientious and more mindful of their options. I think there's going to be obviously tons of companies coming out that have circularity in fashion baked into it. It just doesn't make any sense for people to just keep pummeling the environment with every choice you make just to look nice. There's going to be options that are gonna feel good. You're gonna be able to do good while looking good, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. But I also think we're going to see, just, biodegradable clothes, and there's going to be just, yeah, it's going to be really exciting. That's all I can say. I can't even imagine the ways it's going to be, because it's going to be really exciting, and people are going to come up with some really, really great solutions that bring us back to the basics, but using the power of connectivity and machine learning and things like that to restore the planet in a way that is going to be really, really great.
I guess that leaves me. My sense is that, particularly in the oil, gas, and chemical industries, which are some of the worst polluters in the world right now, there's going to be a lot more attention being paid to more sustainable practices, to less fugitive emissions, to finding ways to be more environmentally responsible. I think it's happening. It's happening quickly, and I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot of progress being made on that front.
The last question that I'll ask is for folks that are listening, what is the best way that they can support and take part in what you guys are doing?
Well, let me start. Actually, we'll go in reverse alphabetical order this time. What I would love to see is a way for these meditation courses, which are really at the heart of my true passion, to expand, to be given for free to communities across the globe, to find ways that we can do it virtually and be more proactive in getting these practices out to people. So I think that will help change everything else. So attend courses, come participate in some of these courses like Neal did, and then help us find a way to get more of them out there, like Neal is doing today.
Emily, Mark, Adarsh, any parting words?
Well, I mean, so for people who are interested in the biking or livable streets movement, there are groups in almost every city of people who are working on these issues. You can get in touch with them. They can connect you in. I publish a blog. One of the main things we do, streetsblog.org. If you want to look at nyc.streetsblog.org or usa.streetsblog.org or just www.streetsblog.org. We have blogs in around 8 different cities or states around the country, and that's a very good news source that can keep you in touch with what's going on, and you can figure out how to connect through that.
Great. Adarsh, Emily?
I would say for anyone who loves music, it's a good idea to buy music on Bandcamp. Much more money going to the artists and labels. There's no major record companies on there. And never, ever buy CDs in jewel cases. They're such a crappy product. They always break, and they're very, very toxic when they end up in landfill.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would say, well, check out Wardrobe. We're Wardrobe in the App Store, and we're wardrobe.co. It's a URL. But yeah, other than that, makes the single choices, not just in fashion, but in everything. As I've become aware, it touches on every aspect, and there's so many good options. Either way you look, it just takes a little bit of digging, and there's so many good options to participate and discover things that are kind of in parallel to the product you were consuming prior to that. But there's a lot of stuff going on. It's all very exciting. And if you choose those options now, you'd be an early adopter, but in a few years, it'll be everywhere. So if you want to call yourself an early adopter, I would say check out those options now.
Well said. I'm getting the notice that we have to wrap up. So thank you guys all for joining us. Definitely check out Brownswood Recordings, Livable Streets, CityRise, Wardrobe, and the Quepasana Foundation. These are some of my favorite things that are happening right now that, as I mentioned, are changing the game. All of you guys, thank you so much for joining and sharing a little bit of what you guys are doing and how you guys are changing the game. For everyone else, you can see the link for the Gather World that Future Meets Present and Earth Day Initiative is doing today. There are nearly 100 companies that are in that marketplace that you can walk around and you can meet different hosts and check out all the remaining events for Earth Week, and maybe we'll bump into each other in a virtual world. So thanks again, everyone. We'll see you guys soon, and excited to see what you guys have coming up.